Once your armature is done, you want to go ahead and bring it over to me and I will grade it. This grade doesn't actually go under the grade book, but it does let you know where you're standing as far as how your overall sculpture grade will be affected by the quality of your work you've done so far and whether you need to fix things. Some of you will have armatures that are just built really well. Everything seems to line up and you might have small gaps, but overall it looks pretty good and it's solid and complete. Others of you are going to have issues with your armatures where you'll have gaps. Your job is to figure out whether this is a visual gap or a structural concern. If it's visual, the way that you can tell that is because if you try and move the pieces around it, it seems pretty solid. The only problem is that you've got a gap. Well, that can be fixed during the covering process. That's not something you're going to solve now. Others of you have a concern like this one, where there is a gap, but when I go to work with it, these pieces physically move a lot. This is a concern that does need to be repaired or fixed, and if you need assistance with that, let me know, because it's not a hard problem to solve. Then the overhangs. Some of you have slight overhangs that you are worried about that's ever so like your finger length. That is an easy thing for us to fix when we do the next covering step. Others of you have overhangs that are substantial, like this one. These cannot get covered up and do need to get cut down. Be very careful though, this is a way that students cut themselves, so watch how you're using either the scissors or the
If you have a project that is square-ish, that could be wrapped as a present, the first thing that you need to do is, we're not going to wrap these like a real present, it's just I use that as a reference point. So you kind of need to take it side by side and you need to measure how much paper you need and you want to overshoot your measurement. So this here, although the actual project is 29.5 inches, when I go to get paper, I'm going to want to get about 2 inches extra on either side. So that gets me at 36 inches. And then I need to measure the overall height, giving 2 inches at either side, which gets me about 17 inches. So once I know that, I'm going to take my ruler and I'm ready to get paper. But before we get paper, we're going to talk about glue. For this step, you might need to use glue to help the paper stick to the sides of your project if you have any curves or bends in the project. Each person is able to get one cup and one lid. You get these from me, and once I check you off, that's it. I only order one per person for the entire year. So you want to keep it, put your name on it in Sharpie, put your class period on it in Sharpie, put your number on it in Sharpie, and then if you're going to use it for multiple things, you need to wash it out or work with your group. Maybe yours is the glue cup and somebody else has the paint cup. To make the glue go, it's just a pump system. You never stand in front of the pump. You always stand off to the side. Paper, we have multiple different colors. You're welcome to switch out your colors slightly to a different color or a probable color for your object based on the options that I have. These cards are on wheels, so you can spin them around until you have access to the original down. You pull it out. I knew I needed 36, which is the length of the paper already, and I needed it by 17, so I grabbed too much. And your eyes will always lie to you about how much you need. So I will say something to you if I see you getting paper without a ruler, because that's being wasted. And then again, I pull up, and I'm keeping the pressure tight in between here and the paper, and I'm just kind of supporting this other leg. And then as I get to this side, I switch it. This pulls my pressure, and this is just supporting. And if it tears a little, that's okay. That's why we get extra. Once you have your paper, you're ready to go back to your project. Once you have your paper, you are going to go ahead and lay your object down on the side that you are going to be using it for. But this is a moment where we need to stop and think, because you want to wrap your project in reverse from the least cared about to the most cared about. So as I look at my sculpture, I am deciding that my sides are the least important part. We don't have to wrap the bottom unless people can see the bottom on your project. And the top is the most important, which means it's the last piece I'm gonna put on. Then once I do my sides, I lay it out on my paper, and I need to cut off any extra, and I just gauge about an inch away from my sculpture and I draw a line. I did this in Sharpie so you can see it clearly. You're going to want to use pencil. Once I've drawn that line all the way around with that inch overhang, then I go ahead and cut it off. Once that's done, I'm ready for taping. To tape my project, I line it up. And then there are some instances where the taping is going to be relatively simple to understand. You just fold it over and then you grab some tape. I recommend tagging it with one longer piece. And then once it's tagged, taking several smaller pieces and finishing it off, making sure again to use your fingernails and seal that in to your actual project. But on the other side, I have a curve, and the curve is going to require me to cut slits because I can't bend this up. So all I do is I take my scissors and I squeeze it under there, and about every inch I slice down until the curve stops, and I realize I can just pull the whole paper up. Once you can pull the whole paper up, these just get a chunk of tape and fold up. You will notice I'm not pulling on this. Like, I'm giving it a little bit of tension so that it's tight, but I don't want to pull it out from the other end. And then I pull from this direction. To do a corner, you're going to take both sides and you're just going to crease it in and pinch, and then you're going to pull, and then you're just going to decide, do I want it to go this direction or this direction, and tape it down. Lastly, when it comes to covering your final piece, you have a choice. Your choice is you can continue to wrap the sides as you've done, but then you're going to have this overhang over here that is taped. Or when you do the tracing part, rather than giving yourself an inch excess, you can cut it exactly to this size so that it's a piece of paper that lays flat on that you glue into place. With your project, there are multiple reasons that while you're doing this paper covering, you do want to use a little bit of glue. For example, my project has this bend in the side, and when I just wrap the paper around, you lose that bend, so I want to glue it ever so slightly into the sides. In order to do this, you have to go to the messy area of your classroom. You might want to put on a schmuck or an art cover-up so that you don't get things on yourself. You know it's a messy table because it would be covered in plastic, which this one is not yet done. Then you're going to use your little glue container that we talked about earlier, and you're going to want to get one of your glue paintbrushes, and again, your teacher will have designated which paintbrushes can be used on glue. Glue is not your friend in this instance, so the least you can use, the better. You go ahead and dip your brush in, and then you put just little teeny tiny amounts, and you will notice that I put it kind of sparingly in little kind of dots almost. And I spread it as thin as I can make it. Preferably, see how I have goobers there? That all needs to be spread out as thin as possible so that it turns to clear. Once I have the glue all spread out so that it's clear, and I have it in just a couple of little areas, so like 10% of my space is covered, then I can take my paper, fold it over, push it into the glue, and as long as I don't have any glue dribbles, I can go back to the clean zone and continue taping down my wrapping. At the end of each class, you're going to have brushes and rollers covered in glue, and if we don't wash these correctly, then they get ruined, and then you won't have them to use the next class time.
In order to wash these out, we'll have a bucket, and in the bucket we always put hot water. You want to just let them sit in the hot water for about 30 seconds to a minute. And I generally wash my hands during this time. Once that has happened, all you have to do is using your thumbs, you squish the brush under the water until the water comes out clear. As long as it's cloudy, it means you're taking out glue. Then you squeeze out all the excess water and it goes into our holder to dry for the next class.